whenever, and I'm going to say Health Canada, but it applies to the government generally, is they pretend that there's this great risk. So this is all being done, apparently for our safety. They're telling us that these natural health products create such a significant risk that we need to be protected from them. But when they're talking about risk, there's kind of two things that are important to keep in mind. And the first is whenever the government tells you you're in danger, you kind of need to ask yourself, well, okay, they're saying I'm in danger from this. How does this danger actually compare to other dangers? When they're trying to take away something like natural health products, you also have to ask yourself, well, what's the danger of taking these products off the market? And in fact, prior to 2004, the entire natural health product industry was completely unregulated.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, even up to about 10 years ago, if you went into a health food store, half of it would be unregulated products. There's still some unregulated products, but I mean, there was no regulation at all for them. But Health Canada pretended that their drug regulations applied to everything. In the way they're written, they do, and they would just selectively go after people to drive products off the market, typically when they were products that actually really worked well. There are a large number of Canadians who are only alive today because they're able to access this type of product. But these products don't kill people. So, for example, I mean, let's just use acetaminophen, which is an over-the-counter pain medicine. The brand name was Tylenol, but the patent's run out, so now it's generically just referred to as acetaminophen. Well, acetaminophen, my understanding is that it kills on average 1 person per million per year, taken as the label instructions. So if there's 40 million Canadians now, we would expect 40 deaths per year from just over-the-counter use of acetaminophen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's more people than the natural health products, all of them in all of Canadian history, have ever caused. Health Canada wants to show, and they want any proof they can to show these things are dangerous. I've heard that, there are now reports of deaths caused by a natural health product. I am skeptical, but let's say it's true. Let's say we have a handful of deaths. Well, so the entire history of a whole industry is dramatically more safe than a single year of use of acetaminophen. You write out every single freedom that you are willing to give up to be protected from being struck by lightning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nobody's going to write anything. Obviously, Mr. Buckley's joking here, because I don't think any of us would give up a single freedom to be protected from a lightning strike, and yet you are 14 times more likely to be struck by lightning than to be killed by a natural health product. I have been, fighting to protect our access to these products, probably for about 29 years now. So I've seen just this steady progression, and their goal is, and they've stated it. So what this is, for your audience that hasn't heard the term, is they're called self-care products now. And this language is deliberate. If you control the language, you control the populace. So instead of them being natural health products, they're going to be called self-care products. And what they're telling us is look, if you go to a health food store and you buy aspirin, or you buy white willow bark, aspirin being the chemical, that version of white willow bark, well, they should be regulated the same way. And we should have the same set of regulations, and we should have the same set of fees. But the problem is chemicals that have been isolated and tweaked so you can get a patent, just given to us in isolation, are tremendously dangerous. So whenever you introduce a novel chemical, so we could all agree that, perhaps we should have strict safety testing and all of that for the chemical drugs. But when you're going to apply that to natural health products, the effect is that you lose the products. There's several ways that we're going to lose products. So first of all, one of the things they're doing is, right now, the natural health product community does not pay any fees for licensing, whether it's site licensing or product licensing, because they're small. They're small little companies, and it would become uneconomic. But because we have to have the same set of regulations, they're bringing in, they're calling it cost recovery, where they're going to impose the fees that the chemical drug companies pay onto the natural health product community. And they haven't costed it all out. And whenever the government's introducing something and saying it's only going to cost this much, you know, it's their figure's tremendously low. But they're predicting yearly they will pull out of the natural health product community $118 million. Well, it is. When you think about it right now, supplements are an upper and middle class phenomenon.
Yeah.
People that are lower middle class or below the middle class really do not, or they already do not have access to these products. So Health Canada is saying actually in their documents, well, we're going to be charging you these fees. And what we're going to use these fees for is to set up a whole new bureaucracy to enforce, first of all, that you're complying with these new strict regulations, but also to go after you and censor you for sharing truthful health information. And there'll be this whole now censorship bureaucracy. Like naturopathic doctors are already being attacked by Health Canada, who advertise about intravenous vitamin C to assist people who are going through chemotherapy for cancer, because it turns out that vitamin C can really help those people.
Yeah.
But for people to know that, the naturopathic doctors have to advertise, and Health Canada is shutting that down. What happened is we kind of got gamed several years ago. So in the late 90s, Health Canada was just driving product after product and manufacturer after manufacturer out of business, trying to apply these drug style regulations onto natural health products, and citizens rebelled. They actually started a lawsuit, and on the eve of the lawsuit, the federal government backed down, and our Minister of Health at the time was Alan Rock, and he said, look, we surrender. we get we're going in the wrong direction. And he said, I'm going to ask the Standing Committee on Health, and that's a committee in Parliament that deals with health issues, and it has members from every party in Parliament. So it's not a partisan thing. It's got members from all parties, and they're the experts in health and health regulations. So he said, I'm going to refer this issue. How should we regulate natural health products to this committee? And I'm going to ask the committee, don't just do a cursory look, do a deep dive here. Like, really figure this out and get back to the government. And Standing Committee of Health, like the consultations, I was told it was the most comprehensive review by any standing committee on any issue in Canadian history up to that point. Like, they just heard from expert after expert and consumers and the whole thing. And they came out with 53 recommendations. And we actually have a link in this discussion paper to that report.
Okay, I think I saw it.
Yeah, and they were clear. You can't regulate them the same as chemical drugs. Like, the risk profile, the whole thing isn't there. And they also said you have to allow traditional use evidence to support efficacy claims. If you read the Food and Drug Act or regulations, it doesn't say that only drugs with a patent can be used to treat serious health conditions. But that's the effect, and here's how it works. To get approval to treat a serious health condition in Canada, you have to go through what's called the new drug approval process. In the drug regulations, that starts at C.08.001 and flows after that. The average cost of going through that process is about $1 billion. Now, if you're a pharmaceutical company and you have a novel chemical with a patent, with a pretty good patent life still left on it, you will pay that $1 billion, or you will be able to raise that $1 billion from investors, because if you get through the process, no one else can sell that drug without your permission. And if you do grant permission, they're going to be paying you a licensing fee. So if you can get through that process, I mean, the amount of money you can make on a good selling drug is just astronomical. Well, if you don't have a patent, you won't get through that process. So in my lifetime, there's been one drug without a patent get through that process, and that was government sponsored. So the effect is in Canada right now, it is functionally illegal to treat a serious health condition with anything but a chemical pharmaceutical drug. no, this has nothing to do with health, and that's why understanding the risk is important. This is really about privileging pharmaceutical drugs, and it's actually, and this is where this ties into, what the NCI was doing in trying to bring about some of the evidence, not a lot. I wish there had been more. We had James Corbett talking about harmonization internationally of drug regulations.
Mhm.
If we are sovereign beings,
Yep.
if we have control over our own bodies, and I believe we should have control over our own bodies, then then you've got to have the right to make personal health decisions. What's happening is economists call this process rent seeking. And so what rent seeking is where the government brings in increasingly strict regulations, making business more complicated and more costly. And the big manufacturers who contribute most to the trade organization will support this. So the trade organization will support this. And slowly and slowly and slowly, it gets stricter and stricter and more expensive. And you create a quasi monopoly. So the small and medium players go out of business and you have 10 big companies left standing. Even though their cost of doing business has become more expensive, they're more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
So their board of directors have a fiduciary duty to support this process. And like I say, they'll be the big funders for the trade organization. So the trade organization will tell everyone, they're called the facilitator in this model, oh, everything's okay, everything's okay, everything's okay, until it's too late and everything isn't okay. And the regulatory body loves it because they charge these huge fees that then they use to expand themselves and have this little bureaucratic empire. So it's really synergistic for the big players and the government bureaucracy. And it's so common that there's actually, it's called rent seeking. It's a specific model that we see in industry after industry. So the big players are already owned by pharma now in the natural health product community.